It's estimated that only 2% of people meet their recommended daily intake of potassium. And that's not a good thing, considering potassium is the most important electrolyte in your body. Hey Wellness Warrior, it's Dr. Zyrowski, and today we're talking about potassium. This mineral is very important for conducting electricity within your body. And you have to remember that your body is an electrical system. So if our nervous system is going to function appropriately, then we have to make sure that we have adequate amounts of potassium. So we're going to talk about a lot in this video. We're going to talk about the deficiency, how it happens. We'll talk about different things such as the symptoms that you'll face, how you can actually replenish potassium amounts in your body, and then the things that can go wrong if you don't have adequate amounts of potassium long term. And lastly, what happens if you get too much potassium in your body? So we have a lot to cover, so let's dive in. Now, the first thing that we want to look at is, why does this happen? You know, when I see patients, one of the big things that people always ask me is, Dr. Zyrowski, why? Why is this happening to me? Sometimes it's kind of difficult to know why you may run into different health issues, but other times it can be cut and dry. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the symptoms, and let's see if you can relate to any of these. And of course, I'll talk to you about how I actually put myself into a massive potassium deficiency, and it caused me a lot of health problems. So let's dive in. So the first thing that we want to look at as a potential cause of a potassium deficiency is if you're doing something very healthy, and that is following the ketogenic diet. Okay, so if you're following the ketogenic diet, this is a good way to fall into a potassium deficiency. And it's not that the ketogenic diet is bad. It's a very healthy diet by pretty much all standards. But the fact is that it actually can lead to that potassium deficiency. And if you are following the ketogenic diet, that's why it's more important to make sure that you're eating lots and lots of fresh green vegetables. Now, let's talk about diet in general, because it's not just the ketogenic diet. If you're following healthy low carb, you can still fall into this category, so just be aware of that. Other thing that we want to look at is sugar. If you're consuming excessive amounts of sugar, I mean, we talk about how the average American consumes over 125 pounds of sugar per day, like that, or per year, I'm sorry, but that's really insane. So that it can be a reason that you can have a potassium deficiency. The next is vomiting or diarrhea. If you maybe been sick, or maybe you have a stomach issue and you find yourself having lots of bouts of diarrhea, then this is a reason for that deficiency. Insulin resistance. Think about this. Over 100 million people in the United States have prediabetes, and they have it unknowingly. So this is certainly a reason that many people would run into this. Surgery or stress on your body. So if you have excessive stress, it's certainly a reason for this. Using diuretics, consuming too little sodium or too much sodium can also be a cause. Alcohol intake, excessive alcohol intake, and then using antibiotics. Okay, this is something where there's literally hundreds of thousands of people taking antibiotics consistently, daily, and they think that it has no recourse on their overall health. Well, one of the things it can actually do is cause a potassium deficiency. And so the last thing that we want to look at here, as far as a major cause, is a magnesium deficiency. And one of the things that you'll realize about these minerals that's really important is that they need all of the different minerals in order to synergistically and appropriately function within your body, right? So we have a lot of people go, well, if I have a potassium deficiency, I'll take a potassium pill, right? And they just think that that's a solution, or taking high doses of a powder of potassium or something along those lines. But the fact is that if your magnesium's imbalanced, or you have a deficiency there, or your sodium's off, or maybe you don't have proper amounts of calcium, what's gonna happen is you're going to get imbalances anyway. So it's important to make sure that you're using multiple minerals all at once. And we'll get to more of that in just a moment. And now, how I put myself into a potassium deficiency issue is through excessive sweating. So I specifically was training for multiple very difficult races, like Spartan races, where I would go out in about 3 times a week. I would exercise out in the heat for about 2 hours. And that would include running about 7 miles. That would include a lot of heavy lifting and carrying things. And I put myself into a huge potassium deficiency, and it caused a lot of symptoms. Let's talk about some of those symptoms, because I experienced like literally all of these. And I didn't know what was going on at the time, because when I was doing all this training, like I really wasn't as familiar with these issues as I am now. Well, one of the things was extreme fatigue. Okay, so if you find yourself in a position where it's like, oh my gosh, like I wake up and I feel like I'm walking through water all the time, the fatigue is just awful, that's probably a potassium deficiency. Certainly want to start focusing on electrolytes there if you're noticing that fatigue issue. And even if you're getting the fatigue factor throughout the afternoon, that is a huge sign of an electrolyte problem. Okay, we want to make sure that our body has proper energy, and we only get proper energy if we have balanced electrolytes. Muscle spasms is a big one, okay? If you get a lot of cramping or muscle spasms, you definitely want to start considering electrolytes and potassium. Weakness overall, so if you just feel your strength is down, maybe you're somebody who's in the gym and you're like, oh, I just feel so weak, it could be potassium. Cramping, which I mentioned. Irregular heartbeat. Okay, this is where it actually gets a little bit scary because you can start getting irregular heartbeats and arrhythmias. And to be honest, I actually got this, right? I would have like these like palpitations, these arrhythmias, and I didn't know what was going on. Well, here's the thing that you have to realize is your heart is a muscle, right? And your muscles don't function properly if you don't have adequate amounts of potassium, which we just mentioned. So therefore, it can cause some serious problems that could actually even be fatal, believe it or not. So we got to be careful there. When you see like, extreme athletes and they have massive heart attacks, sometimes it is related to a potassium and mineral issue. Vomiting is another one, okay? And then constipation and nausea, okay? So those are other symptoms that can happen. And the nausea one, I think I remember that I was feeling a little bit of nausea here and there. So those are things we all want to work to avoid. And we do this by making sure that we have adequate amounts of potassium, which leads me to the sponsor of this video. And the sponsor of this video is Electrolyte Plus. Now, Electrolyte Plus is an amazing and dynamic hydration drink. And the thing is that's so important about proper hydration is not just about taking piles of sodium or potassium or calcium. It's making sure that you have the right amount of each one of them. And it's making sure that your body is actually able to utilize them appropriately. So this month, you're able to actually get 20% off Electrolyte Plus by using code JUICY20. Now, I have used Electrolyte Plus for many years, and it's honestly delicious, and I use it almost every single day. So I'm a huge fan of their orange flavor and also their blue raspberry. So check them out in order to receive 20% off. Link in the description below. And I'm a big fan of using a hydration drink like this. Now, of course, you can get it from your food as well. Now, I specifically want to get it from both sources because I find that to be very, very useful. So let's now take a look at food, right? So we talked about using a hydration powder with potassium and sodium and all the things that are necessary. But let's take a look at what you can eat in order to increase your hydration as well. Now, the first thing that is loaded with potassium is gonna be beet greens, okay? Problem is that most people who hear this are gonna go, first of all, what are beet greens? And second of all, why would I eat those, right? Most people don't even understand what they are. So this is why sometimes using like a hydration powder, a electrolyte formula is really powerful, okay? So beet greens, yams is another huge source, pinto beans, white potatoes, and now you're understanding why those who follow low-carb diet or even the ketogenic diet start to have more potassium issues. Look at the sources, right? Beet greens is obviously going to be more keto approved, but when you look at yams and pinto beans and white potatoes, I mean, not so much. Portobello mushrooms are a great source of potassium. Avocados, and then sweet potatoes, okay? Now, these are all good sources of potassium that you can include into your diet so that you don't have these deficiency issues, okay? Now we're gonna take a look real quick at some of the benefits of improving your levels of potassium, how it actually impacts your body. First of all, there's plenty of studies that show that it reduces blood pressure, okay? It's estimated that 1 in 3 Americans have high blood pressure, and this is an enormous problem. So we want to make sure anything we can do to counteract that, we're actually implementing. So potassium's a good option. Lots of good research on that. So we can reduce our blood pressure by improving our potassium intake. Also, it reduces water retention, okay? So if you're somebody who feels that you're just in a position where you're holding water all the time, it could be because of a potassium deficiency. And so what happens is that when you consume more potassium, remember, only 2% of people are meeting their daily intake requirements for potassium. So there's a good chance that you could be facing this. So you increase your urine production when you have adequate amounts of potassium, and then you also decrease your sodium levels as well. And that's what's been shown to happen is that actually when you have decreased potassium, you actually get a sodium buildup in the body that becomes unhealthy because your body's not able to clear it out well. So you want to get potassium up. The next thing that's going to happen is we can actually regulate muscle contraction much better when we have adequate amounts of potassium. And you might ask yourself, well, okay, what does that mean? So first of all, avoiding all the muscle weakness we mentioned, avoiding the cramping and the muscle spasms, also making sure that we are able to have a well-functioning heart, because your heart is a muscle. So if we want to avoid arrhythmias and irregular heartbeats, then potassium is really important. So that's what we want to look for. And then it is very important for our nervous system function. Okay, so we mentioned earlier that as we look at our nervous system, it is an electrical system and it conducts nerve impulses, basically electricity within the body. So therefore, if it can't do this correctly, you could start getting all kinds of weird symptoms associated with a potassium and electrolyte deficiency, where you're getting like numbness and tingling in certain areas or shooting pains. So we want to keep that up, okay? Now, next on our list is going to be, it will help our digestion. People who get potassium deficiencies can have all kinds of digestive issues in the way of like constipation. And so we want to make sure that for our digestion to function properly, we're getting adequate amounts of potassium. And then the other one is pH balance, okay? So pH balance is really important because our body has all these different pHs in it. And our body uses pH as a mechanism to operate correctly, okay? So for instance, in our gut, it's very important to have proper pH, because what it does is it makes sure that bacteria within the gut doesn't enter into areas it shouldn't be and cause infections. It's very important to make sure you have proper pH in your stomach so you can break down food and keep out viruses and bacteria from getting into your system. So pH is very important. Well, potassium helps balance pH in our system. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep potassium balanced out. Now, a big question is going to be, well, how much do I need a day? So it's estimated that you should be somewhere right around 4,000 to 4,700 milligrams of potassium per day as far as intake goes. And as we mentioned, only 2% of people meet these requirements, okay? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we increase the amount of food that we're consuming that's rich in potassium, but we also can even use some of these powders, like electrolyte powders, like the one I mentioned today, which you can get 20% off by using code JUICY20, using powders like this in order to make sure that we have adequate amounts of potassium within our system. But here's the thing, is that we don't want excessive amounts, right? So usually when people hear stuff like this, they go, well, if too little is bad, then a lot must be good. The problem is that you can have hyperkalemia, which is not necessarily going to be healthy for you either. So we want to make sure that we do not take too much potassium, because that overdose is very hard on the kidneys. And when we look at some of these different powders or pills where people are consuming them, and these powders might have 4,000 milligrams of potassium in them, hard on the kidneys. And if you overdo it, you're going to have issues just the same. Just like anything with our health, we don't want to go overboard, but we also want to make sure that we're not finding ourselves in a deficient state. So balance is the key here when it comes to anything to do with your health. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like this one, I think you'll really like this video next.